Imagine being caught in the middle of a thunderstorm, the deafening roar of thunder shaking the ground beneath you, lightning tearing through the sky, and a sense of dread creeping in with every passing second. Thunderstorms are more than just nature's fury. They can become the perfect backdrop for something sinister. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're diving into 3 disturbing, true thunderstorm horror stories that will make you think twice the next time you hear the rumble of thunder. These stories are chilling, suspenseful, and guaranteed to keep you on the edge of your seat. So grab a blanket, turn off the lights, and let's get into it. Story 1, The Cabin in the Storm by Caleb. My name is Caleb, and a few years ago, I rented a remote cabin in the woods for what I thought would be a peaceful getaway. I wanted to escape the noise and stress of city life. Just me, the trees, and some much-needed solitude. But what I experienced during a violent thunderstorm left me questioning whether I'd ever seek isolation again. The first 2 days at the cabin were blissfully uneventful. I spent my time hiking, reading by the fireplace, and listening to the sounds of nature. On the third evening, the weather began to change. Dark clouds rolled in, and the forecast, which had only mentioned light rain, was clearly off. The first rumbles of thunder began just as I finished dinner. By the time night fell, the storm had fully settled in. Rain lashed against the windows, the wind howled through the trees, and the cabin lights flickered ominously. I tried to enjoy the cozy atmosphere, wrapping myself in a blanket by the fireplace. But there was something unsettling about the storm. It wasn't just loud, it felt alive, like it had a presence of its own. Around 10 p.m., as I was finishing a book, I heard it, a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. Who would be out here in the middle of nowhere during such a storm? I froze, listening intently. The knocking came again, steady and deliberate. I got up and approached the door cautiously. Peeking through the peephole, I saw nothing but darkness. "Hello?" I called out, but there was no response. The wind howled louder, and the knocking stopped. Thinking it must have been the wind or a loose branch, I locked the door and went back to my spot by the fire. Minutes later, the knocking returned, louder this time. It wasn't the random tapping of a branch. It was rhythmic, deliberate, and it sent a chill down my spine. I grabbed the flashlight from the table and flung the door open. Rain poured in, soaking the porch, but no one was there. The forest loomed dark and impenetrable, lit only briefly by flashes of lightning. I stepped outside, shining the flashlight into the woods. "Is someone there?" I called, but the only response was the thunder overhead. As I turned to go back inside, a flash of lightning illuminated the trees, and I saw it. A figure standing just beyond the tree line, motionless, watching me. I stumbled back inside, slamming the door shut and locking it. My hands were trembling as I checked all the windows. Another flash of lightning, and the figure was closer now, just at the edge of the yard. It wasn't moving, but I could feel its gaze, heavy and piercing. The knocking resumed, this time from the back door, then the front door. My chest tightened as I realized it wasn't just one figure. The knocking grew louder, more insistent, coming from all sides of the cabin. I grabbed the fire poker and crouched in the corner of the living room, my eyes darting to every window and door. The storm outside raged on, but the sound of the knocking was deafening, drowning out even the thunder. I shouted, "Who's there? What do you want?" But no answer came. Hours passed like this, me paralyzed with fear, gripping the fire poker as the storm and the knocking continued. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it all stopped. The rain eased, the wind died down, and an eerie silence fell over the cabin. When daylight broke, I finally mustered the courage to step outside. The yard was empty. There were no footprints in the mud, no sign of anyone or anything. But when I turned to inspect the door, my stomach dropped. Etched into the wood were 3 deep scratches, jagged and deliberate, as if made by claws. To this day, I have no explanation for what happened that night. I've told myself it was just the storm playing tricks on me, but deep down, I know it wasn't. Something or someone was out there, and it wasn't just passing through. Story 2, The Stranger on the Road by Vanessa. My name is Vanessa, and I've been driving trucks for nearly 10 years. I've encountered all kinds of strange things on the road, But nothing could have prepared me for what happened during a thunderstorm in Texas. It was late one night, and I was hauling a shipment of produce to a distribution center in Dallas. The weather had been unpredictable all day, but by the time night fell, the storm had grown intense. Sheets of rain battered my windshield, and the wipers struggled to keep up. The occasional flash of lightning illuminated the dark, desolate highway, while the thunder growled ominously in the distance. I was already on edge when I spotted something unusual up ahead. A figure was walking along the side of the highway, hunched against the rain. It was dangerous to be out in that weather, especially on a stretch of road so far from any town or gas station. I slowed down, debating whether I should stop and help. As I got closer, the figure turned toward my truck, and in the glow of my headlights, I saw a man. He was soaking wet, his clothes clinging to his body, and his face was pale and gaunt. He raised a hand, signaling for me to stop. Against my better judgment, I pulled over and rolled down the passenger side window slightly. "Are you okay?" I asked, shouting over the sound of the rain. The man nodded but didn't say a word. His eyes were wide and hollow, and something about him made me uneasy. Still, I couldn't just leave him out there. "Do you need a ride?" I asked hesitantly. He nodded again, and without waiting for an invitation, he climbed into the cab. Water dripped from his clothes onto the seat, and he shivered violently. "Thank you," he finally muttered, his voice low and hoarse. I tried to make conversation as I started driving again, but he gave short, vague answers. He said his name was Aaron and that his car had broken down miles back. He claimed he had been walking for hours trying to find help, but something about his story didn't add up. For one, I hadn't passed any abandoned vehicles on the road, and despite the cold and wet conditions, he wasn't carrying a jacket or bag. The more I looked at him, the more unsettled I felt. His hands were trembling, but they were also covered in dirt. Or was it something else? The storm grew worse as we drove, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Aaron sat silently, staring straight ahead, his expression unreadable. Then out of nowhere he asked, "Do you believe in second chances?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" I asked, glancing at him. He turned to look at me, his eyes dark and intense. "Sometimes people make mistakes. Sometimes they deserve another chance to make things right." I didn't know how to respond, so I stayed quiet. The air in the cab felt heavy, and I could feel my grip tightening on the steering wheel. Suddenly, Aaron pointed to an upcoming rest area. "Can you drop me off there?" he asked. Relieved to be parting ways, I agreed and pulled into the empty parking lot. He got out without another word, disappearing into the rain. As soon as he was gone, I felt a wave of relief. But as I started to pull back onto the highway, I glanced in my side mirror and froze. Aaron was standing at the edge of the lot watching me. Another flash of lightning lit up the scene, and my stomach dropped. He wasn't alone. There were others with him now, 3, maybe 4 shadowy figures standing in the rain, their faces obscured. They were all staring at my truck. Panic surged through me, and I floored the gas pedal, speeding away from the rest area. My heart pounded as I kept checking the mirrors, but the figures didn't follow. I drove non-stop until I reached the distribution center, refusing to stop for anything. To this day, I don't know who or what Aaron really was, but every time I think about that night, I remember his question. "Do you believe in second chances?" I still don't know what he meant, but one thing is certain: I'll never pick up a hitchhiker again, especially during a storm. Story 3, The Visitor in the Storm, by Erica. My name is Erica, and this happened during a thunderstorm in the summer of 2019. I was staying at my grandparents' farmhouse in rural Arkansas, helping them with some repairs. The house was old, creaky, and surrounded by endless fields, the nearest neighbor miles away. It was the perfect place to enjoy peace and quiet, or so I thought. That night, the storm came out of nowhere. One minute, the sky was clear, and the next, it was an orchestra of thunder and lightning. The rain came down in torrents, drumming against the roof so loudly that it drowned out everything else. My grandparents had already gone to bed, leaving me alone in the living room, curled up on the couch with a book. The storm didn't bother me at first. In fact, I found it soothing until the power went out. The room was plunged into darkness, except for the occasional flash of lightning. I grabbed my phone for light and made my way to the kitchen to find a flashlight. That's when I heard it, a faint knocking sound coming from the back door. At first, I thought it was just the wind or a branch tapping against the house, but the knocks were too deliberate, too rhythmic to be random. My stomach tightened as I walked toward the back door. The farmhouse was in the middle of nowhere. Who could possibly be out there during such a storm? "Hello!" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. The knocking stopped. I hesitated, debating whether to open the door, but something told me not to. Instead, I peeked through the window next to the door, but all I could see was darkness and sheets of rain. Convinced it was just my imagination, I went back to the living room. I had just settled back onto the couch when I heard it again, this time louder, more insistent. The knocking wasn't coming from the back door anymore. It was coming from the front. My heart pounded as I crept toward the front door. I peered through the peephole, but the storm made it impossible to see anything. "Who's there?" I shouted, but there was no response. Suddenly, lightning lit up the yard, and for a brief second, I saw a figure standing on the porch. It was a man, tall and thin, his face obscured by the rain. My throat tightened as I realized he wasn't knocking with his hand. He was using his head. I stumbled back, my pulse racing. The knocking stopped abruptly, and when I looked through the peephole again, the porch was empty. I locked all the doors and windows, double-checking everything, and grabbed the largest knife I could find from the kitchen. I tried to convince myself it was just some drifter looking for shelter, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. Then the footsteps started. They were faint at first, just above the sound of the rain. I thought I was imagining it, but as I strained to listen, they grew louder. They were coming from the second floor. My grandparents were upstairs, asleep. My heart raced as I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but there was no signal. The storm had knocked out the cell tower. I was on my own. I crept up the stairs, gripping the knife tightly. The hallway was pitch black, and the only light came from the occasional flash of lightning through the windows. I could hear the footsteps now, slow and deliberate, coming from my grandparents' bedroom. I pushed the door open, my breath caught in my throat. The room was empty. My grandparents were gone. The window was wide open, rain soaking the floor, and the curtains flapped violently in the wind. Panic surged through me as I searched the house, but they were nowhere to be found. The only trace of them was their slippers, neatly placed by the bed. The storm raged on, and I spent the rest of the night locked in the bathroom, clutching the knife and praying for morning. When the storm finally passed and the sun rose, I found my grandparents sitting on the porch, completely dry, as if nothing had happened. They didn't remember the storm, the knocking, or even going to bed the night before. To this day, I don't know what I encountered that night. All I know is that the storm didn't just bring rain, it brought something else, something that still haunts me every time I hear thunder. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more creepy stories. Which of these stories gave you a chilling experience? Let us know. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that are real.